Hello all, this is Mr. Trudy here. This video will be about how to analyze and translate sentences using action verbs or verbs of motion as opposed to linking verbs. Just some review from earlier. Remember, in Latin, the preferred order with action verbs or verbs of motion is subject first, verb last, and then direct object in between, often right next to your subject. Okay? English order, on the other hand, we have subject, and then the verb, and then our direct object. So you can notice, in Latin, the verb comes at the end. In English, it's usually placed second. Now, looking at our first sentence here, we have vitam agricolae laudamus. When you are going from Latin to English, it is always good to start with your verb, and you will see why here very soon. So laudamus, if you have your personal endings memorized, you recognize that mus ending as your first plural ending. So it's the pronoun we is hiding in that mus ending. The tense, remember the tense will be present for a number of lessons, so always just put present tense in there. It denotes action that is currently ongoing. And then the translation, since we have laudamus, you look at your stem lauda there. You see that's from laudo, laudare, which means to praise. And the mus tells us that we are the ones doing the praising. So we'd have, as our translation, we praise. Now, something which is very, very important. If we have a verb that has a first or second person ending, whether singular or plural, our subject is going to be within that verb for all of this year and even quite a bit of next year. So if you get that tip down now, it will make translation much easier. So since we have first plural here, we don't need to look for our subject elsewhere in the sentence because we know it's going to be in our verb. So our verb and our subject are one and the same here. So we have our action verb, and then we have our subject in the ending. Now, since we have our verb and our subject, we don't need to look for our subject next, so we can look for our direct object, which is a good third step in translating. Here, our direct object, we look at the rest of the words and we see one with this am ending. Now that am ending is a dead giveaway of an accusative singular if it's on a noun. So vitam here would be our direct object. You can tell that in Latin based off of the ending on it, remember? So our gender, since it's first declension, we have primarily feminine genders. Number, am is singular. Case would be accusative. And our function would be direct object, as we stated. And that leaves us with agricolae left. Here, agricolae would not make much sense as our nominative plural. We already have our subject. But since it's right next to our noun vitam, we can take it as a genitive of possession. In fact, that's what these brackets here are telling you. So you take this as a unit of some sort, and then the parentheses here are telling you that that's a genitive of possession. Hopefully that helps you to see how these two are related. So agricolae here. Remember, agricolae is one of the few masculine first declension nouns. It's singular, and we stated, since it's showing possession, we have genitive, and it's our genitive of possession. Now, we have our sentence diagrammed out, so we can move on to translation. We have our verb and our subject already translated. So we praise, laudamus. And then What are we praising? So what receives the action of the verb here? It is the vitam, so the life. And whose life? It's the life of the farmer. Remember, for your direct object, accusative case in Latin, you do not need a preposition. With our genitive of possession, often of whatever the word means is the best way to translate that. So we have, we praise the life of the farmer. Moving down to sentence 7, we'll see something a bit different than what we have with first and second person verbs, whether singular or plural. So here in 7 we have Aeneas et Creusa in Asia terra habitant. So we look at habitant as our verb, and we notice that nt ending, so it's going to be third, plural, present tense, so it's currently happening. And then our translation of your third plural pronoun in English is they, and then the habitat tells you they are living or dwelling. So some they is living. Now, whenever you have a third plural or a third singular in a Latin sentence, you have to look for a subject. So it's not necessarily going to be in your verb. It could, but it may not be. You look for your subject of a sentence right at the beginning, most often, and if whatever is at the beginning here is in the nominative case and corresponds to the number, so whether it's singular or plural of your verb, you will probably have your subject there. So here we look at 7. We have Aeneas et Creusa. So Aeneas here is a Greek name, as, but that's a nominative singular ending. And Creusa, we have our nominative singular short a ending from the first declension. Now both of these are singular, but together they are plural. So our subject here is Aeneas et Creusa. Our gender, we don't actually have a gender here, it's masculine and feminine. The number is plural. Remember, your verb and your subject must always agree in number. You have subject-verb agreement in number. Case will be nominative, and the function will be our subject. Now we have our subject and we have our verb. Now if you remember the meaning of your verb habito, habitare, it means to live or to inhabit. And since to live and to inhabit are both what we call verbs of motion, here verbs of rest, they quite often take a place construction. The place construction we have so far is the ablative of place where. And sure enough, if we look at what's left in our sentence here, we have in Asia terra. So we have our preposition in indicating a place construction. Remember from last year, well, last week, not last year, terra, we have that long a ending on it, so we know we have the ablative singular of the first declension. So terra is feminine, number is singular, and case is ablative. Function would be your place where. Okay. So in plus the ablative, place where. Now, what is this Asia doing here? So Asia is a noun. It's also in the ablative singular, and it's feminine. You can tell that by the long a ending. Now, since we have a noun next to another noun in the same case, and that noun is telling us something more about the object of our preposition here, which is terra, we call that use apposition. So apposition is actually a lot like an adjective, except instead of being an adjective, it's a noun. So it's telling you more about some noun, further specifying it in some way, but it's going to be a noun, not an adjective. So here we have in the land, and the land is what? It's Asia. So in the land, Asia. In English, it's often better to add an of there, so in the land of Asia. But you can leave the of out, simply place a comma to catch the apposition in the English translation without potentially throwing yourself off and making yourself think that it's a genitive. Okay, so we have apposition here. In fact, you will often have apposition with the use of names. So it has the man Aeneas, the woman Creusa, the land Asia. All of those would be examples of apposition in English. Now moving down to our translation. Remember, our English word order is subject, verb, and then direct object, or whatever else. So we have our subject, Aeneas and Creusa. Jump to your verb, they live. So Aeneas and Creusa live. And where do they live? They live in the land Asia.